Welcome to the new podcast, In the Garden with Susan. I'm your host, Susan Ladner. I will aim to bring you top quality information on how to save open-pollinated seeds, grow a garden, and preserve what you grow. Every Wednesday, I'll be sharing practical tips and techniques to help you on your journey to food security. Join me as I preserve the abundance of produce that my garden provides. Learn new ways of putting food away for the winter and some old ways that are from another century. You can find this podcast on Shopify and at my website. Come on, let's go wander down to the garden and awaken the dreams, history, and love that is held inside every seed. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of In the Garden with Susan. Today, I want to get into microgreens, and not in the sense of how to grow microgreens, because there's so much information out there, and there are people that they're much more knowledgeable than I am. And so as we're looking at how can we become more self-sufficient and eat things that we're growing, I've started to think about starting some pea shoots right now and some radish. I want to start some microgreens. And I've been thinking, where will we get our seeds? Because some of them are getting very expensive. And so what if we can grow our own seeds, which we can? And please excuse in the background, I have 10 puppies. My dog, that is a Kangal Anatolian Shepherd, the neighbor down at the end of the road, his purebred border collie came down and was visiting my dog. And so it was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't know that the pregnancy was 65 days. And so now I have 10 puppies and they're on my bed because my dog, Koala, sleeps on that bed. So you may hear them in the background. And they're quite noisy. Like sometimes they sound like a bunch of little kids. And some of them are really talkative. So anyway, back to the microgreens. I think it's this time of year when you're starting to do your seed orders. I know there's a couple seed companies out there and they sell microgreens. And so right now, if you are starting to grow microgreens or you're buying the seeds, maybe start to think about you can not only put those in the trays and grow them, but you can take some of the microgreens that are there growing and you can then plant them in the garden and let them grow into the big plant and go to seed. And so there's a lot of things to consider when looking at this, because some plants are annuals and some are biennials, as we know. Some are also perennials that you can find from microgreens. But as I've been looking into this, I thought this would be a one show. I just thought, oh yeah, this is something I'm going to do because I want to be a lot more self-sufficient. And so growing my own microgreen seeds, it makes sense. I thought, oh, I'm just do one episode about this. And I've spent the last couple days doing research into this topic, and I've fallen down a bit of a rabbit hole. I am discovering there are way more seeds that can be grown from microgreens. Some are completely shocking. I would have never even dreamt. If someone would have told me some of these plants could be done from microgreens, I'd say no way. So I think maybe, the next 2 or 3 shows might be looking at what microgreens can we save for the seed for ourselves. And also thinking about the biennials. Some of these crops, if you decide that you want to save them for seed, you will be growing the root or the plant to full-size maturity, then saving it over next winter, and then put it into the ground next spring, and they will go to seed then. So we're going to get started. It's very interesting to me, and it's more interesting because I'm not an expert in this at all, and so we are going to be learning together. And now, the first thing I think when you're going to start planning this is to choose the right varieties. And this will be huge. As I've been looking at microgreens, I'm actually surprised that there's quite a few hybrids that are grown from microgreens. And so you really want to make sure that you're using open pollinated or heirloom seeds when you're doing this. And so if you do have some packs of microgreens right now, you can look them up and check, like, is this open pollinated or an heirloom variety? And then you know that those seeds, when you save them, will be true to type. And so you're going to want to avoid the hybrids, and they will be labeled as F1. And those seeds may not grow true to type. You may get one of the parents, you may get something else that you just don't know. And so, best to not even take all that time to be saving them, because something with this is you're going to be doing this project as you will be continuing these, it'll be your self sufficiency. So, every few years, maybe you'll grow them out depending on how many seeds you have, and you know that that variety will stay true to type. You're going to think about the bolting traits, because some plants like cilantro and arugula, they will naturally bolt, which is going to seed quickly. And this is an advantage for seed saving. It's not always an advantage when you want to eat the food. And this is sort of something that we're going to see is the bonus. If you don't have a lot of space, and some of these crops that we're going to be talking about, you're going to be able to eat off those plants and also leave them to go to seeds. Some of them no, but there will be some food that's coming through as you're saving the seeds. So we also, one of the things you're going to start thinking about is preparing the growing environment. And microgreens, they're grown very densely, but the plants grown for seed need lots of space to mature. And so after you can put your tray, you don't have to, you can take those microgreen seeds and you can plant them in their own little pots, start them early, or not, or put them out in the ground. But they are going to have to be planted a lot bigger. I know sometimes when I've had trays, after I'm done with the microgreen tray, I have gone and tossed them out. And I remember a few times in Ontario, I threw some of the spent mats of microgreens out into the garden, and it just didn't work because they were way too close together. I was a little too lazy and busy to separate them out, but we'll talk about that. Um, then you're going to want to think about the soil. You're going to use nutrient rich, well draining soil to support the healthy plant development. You'll think about lighting. So, to ensure the plants receive full sun, or you need adequate grow lights if you're starting them indoors. And some of them will need support when you're thinking about, as these plants are growing. The taller plants like sunflowers or fennel may require staking to prevent them from falling over. And I know I grew one variety last summer. It was the mammoth giant, and they grew so large. So I had planted them along the fence, and I just, as they grew, gave them support that way. Something else to think about is the pollination. So, self pollinating plants like lettuce, peas, and beans will pollinate themselves. So, isolation isn't super critical. I know if you are growing varieties as a seed saver to keep things, pure, the variety pure, that there may not be any cross pollination. Like peas, you can separate them by 50, 60 feet. Beans, you can go through that, and you can see if you keep them with a lot of space between them. Sometimes you can put like the flowers that attract the pollinators, so they'll go to that flower instead of the bean flowers. And you can also alternate when they are flowering. And lettuce also, if you keep them separated with the isolation, it just keeps them more but isolation is not critical when you're doing a project like this. And then cross-pollinating plants like the brassicas, basil, and others, they probably will cross-pollinate with similar species. And to prevent cross-pollination, you want to separate the varieties by at least 500 meters or more. And you could also use physical barriers like row covers or grow only one variety at a time. And something to think about with this also is if you have neighbors that are letting some of these go to seed or flower, you never know, like you may think you only have one variety in your garden, but depending on how close your garden is to someone else, that's something to think about also. You're going to think about managing plant health and pest management. I've noticed like there's always going to be pests. That's part of gardening, like aphids, caterpillars. Caterpillars are the bane of my existence. Like, I really love eating brassica plants, and they get right in the broccoli and kale, and they can just destroy things. And I mean, I'll still eat some of these crops when they have had some insect damage, because it does make them stronger and healthier, but it's not optimum. They can decimate plants and they can take them out. Also, birds can damage flowers or seeds. And watering. You want to reduce the watering once the seed pods begin to form to avoid mold or rotting, and ensure consistent moisture before flowering. And this is something I noticed this year. It's actually the first year I've gardened where it's been such drought conditions and I had such a lack of water. I just wasn't able to water as much as I wanted. And I noticed some varieties, some of my crops of seeds did not produce as many seeds as they should have because they didn't have the water. I'm noticing some of my bean varieties, as I'm shelling them, they are smaller than they normally are. They did go to seed, and those bean seeds will grow. However, they're a lot smaller because some of them didn't get water except to get them germinated. You're also going to want to think about weeding. When you're growing some of these plants out to go to seed, they will be needed to be kept weed free, and that will reduce the competition for nutrients. So, allowing the seeds to mature, this is going to take some patience because you're going to allow the plants to grow past their harvest stage until the flowers bloom and seeds form. And seeds like radishes, peas, and lettuce mature best if left to dry on the plant. And with the lettuce, I will go out as they're flowering and I start to see the fluff and they dry down. I'll collect seeds as they go along because the lettuce won't produce all at the same time. And sometimes I'll take a big bucket and I'll gently tip over the lettuce plant flowers and I'll just knock it so the seeds fall into the bucket. Depending on what method you want to do, there's different methods to collect the seeds. And with peas, they're planted so early in the season that it's easy to let them grow and dry down on the plant and then just collect however you do it. Like, there can be harvesting all the dried pods as the plant is still staked or in the garden, or as I usually do because I'm so busy and I have the big pea crop, I will just cut the plants just above the soil and I will throw all of that onto a tarp or something. Sometimes it gets stored somewhere until I can take those seeds out of there. And so that's another way to do it. And you're going to want to watch on these things for dried seed pods or flower heads, and you can take them out as you see them appearing. And now, harvesting the seeds before they scatter. Timing is crucial. I have this past year lost a few seed crops. I was able to save the seed, but I don't think in a quantity that I really can offer them, because sometimes they will scatter. Like for plants with pods, you want to collect them when they turn brown and a bit brittle. And I know that the California poppy, I was ready to collect the seeds from them. I've never grown it before. And it just seemed like within that one morning I looked and I was like, I need to get these today. And when I went out next, they had opened and shattered everywhere. So it's something to think about. And I'm not saying California poppies are something to grow for microgreens, just putting that out there. I'm still discovering the edible flowers that can be grown for microgreens. And that's something I need to do more of a deep dive in. So, this is also something to think about. You're not going to be able to take any plant and say, I'm growing these plants, I'm going to save the seeds and grow microgreens, because you really want to make sure that that variety is edible before you do anything like that. So for harvesting and cleaning the seeds, for dry seeds, you can place them in a brown bag over the seed heads and cut them off. And I will do that. The grocery store bags are great for this. And so sometimes when I'm collecting the seeds, I will cut off whatever. Sometimes if it is the lettuce, even with dill, some of the herbs, I will cut off the seed heads that are ready, and I will put them into the paper bags and then let them sit somewhere to finish drying. And we don't really have to think about the tomatoes, because we're not growing tomatoes for microgreens. And wet seeds, it's a little bit different when you're saving seeds for those, because you're fermenting them and you're removing the gel coating. Threshing, gently crush the pods or flower heads to release the seeds. And then for winnowing, you can use the fan or gently blow to remove the debris or shaft from the seeds. And really, the fan works best. And also when you have any screens, I find that works great, putting them through different screens. So for seed drying and storage, you can spread the seeds in a single layer on a tray or screen in a cool, dry, and dark location for 1 to 2 weeks. And then the seeds should be brittle and snap when bent to make sure there's still no moisture in them. And then you can store your seeds in an airtight container, like glass jars, and keep them in a cool and dark place. And then, as always, label them and do your record keeping. And so, planning for future generations. Some seeds will last only 2 to 3 years, like lettuce, while others, such as peas, can remain viable for 5+ years. And so you can plan your rotation to maintain fresh seed stock. And when you're growing these for microgreens, you'll probably go through them a lot faster. I know even for saving peas, it would be so easy for some of these varieties to grow out the microgreens and eat them all in one season. So something like the peas, you will want to be planning to grow them every year. And for saving the seeds, you want to always choose from the healthiest, most productive plants to ensure strong genetics for future crops. Now, something I wanted to look at, because myself, what I think is a really easy way to do it is, if you have your packs of microgreens, you bought them from a commercial source, those microgreen seeds are going to be what you want to save seed from. If they are heirlooms, check and make sure they're heirloom or open-pollinated. I should have probably explained, in case some of my listeners do not know what microgreens are. They are young, nutrient-dense versions of leafy greens, herbs, and other vegetables. And they're easy to grow. Well, some of them are. I've some of them are not, but I think if you follow directions and you make sure you know what you're doing before, you just can't throw all of these microgreen seeds on a tray of soil or whatever medium, and some of them have a little trick to get them going. But they can be harvested in as little as 1 to 3 weeks. And now um, you're going to select your microgreen seeds that are suitable for your climate and your desired harvest time. Like some of the popular ones are broccoli, pea shoots, radish, sunflower, and kale. And those guys are all, relatively easy to grow. And then you'll prepare the growing medium. So you'll use a shallow tray or a container with drainage holes filled with the growing medium like coconut coir, hemp, or jute. I like to grow a lot of my microgreens in soil. I will buy the organic soil mix from the store. I do have some soil. I can't remember the name of them, but they are darn expensive. I think they're like $30 for 5 of them. So I still have some, and it's like the good china. They just sit there because it's almost like they're so expensive to use. And then so you're going to spread your seeds evenly over your growing medium and follow the package instructions on density and spacing. And also think about some of the seeds you're not going to want to grow a big tray of. I know when I bought some microgreens a couple years ago, I bought a lot of cress, and because it was such a good deal. And I remember the first time I grew a normal tray size of these cress, and they are intense. And they're very intense. And so some of them you're going to want to look at, like, how they are. You may just want to grow a little bit. And I have some small little containers, like you just keep tiny ones. And it may seem like I'm not growing very many in here, but with some microgreens, a little goes a long way. And maybe you just will want a few. You just need a few of those microgreens in a salad or on a sandwich or something. You don't need a whole bunch. But there's other microgreens like pea shoots and sunflower sprouts, even radish sprouts. I can eat a whole salad of just those, just because they're so good. So, okay, so you're putting your seeds out, you're spreading them evenly, and then you're going to water them gently but thoroughly. Place the tray in a location with indirect light. You're going to want to cover them. Again, different varieties need different things, so I'm not going to give you, tell you how to do that because they're all different. And then you'll maintain your humidity and temperature, um, which is between 18 degrees to 24, and keep the growing medium consistently moist. And then for harvesting them, you'll cut the microgreens just above the soil line using scissors or a sharp knife, and harvest when they're 1 to 2 inches tall, depending on the variety. That's just a quick directions on basically how to grow microgreens. By all means, I would suggest, getting into someone who's more knowledgeable and do that, because there's way more to it than that. Like there's a lot more. But what I'm interested in now is, so I've got my tray of microgreens. I've grown them out. I've eaten some. And how now can I move some of these into growing into a plant to go put in the garden to make it into, a larger plant that'll go to seed. And so once you've harvested your microgreens, you're going to want to transplant some of these into pots. Okay, so you're going to prepare your soil, and you're going to have your tray with some of the plants growing. And sometimes what I found, when you have your tray of microgreens, after you've harvested, there'll always be some that show up later. They're the late starters, the seeds that didn't germinate with the rest of them. And there they are. They'll grow up if you keep that tray watered. And so you'll have these little plants there, and you're either going to put them in pots and start them growing before you can put them into the garden. Maybe keep them in the greenhouse or on your windowsill, and you'll gently remove the microgreens from the growing medium, taking care not to damage the roots. And that's kind of hard on some of them, but I have in the past. You can nudge them out because the roots won't be very long. Or you could, if you have just one guy that's come up, you can pull that whole mat apart with the plants there. Generally, plants are not that finicky, and they'll handle being taken apart, all their roots pulled apart. And so when you go to transplant them in the pot or in the garden, you will plant them 1 to 2 inches deeper than they were in the tray, depending on the variety's mature height. And then you will water them thoroughly and provide adequate sunlight, water, and nutrients for the developing plants. Now, saving seeds from these plants, you've got them out in your garden. So you're going to plan out where you're going to plant them. I would suggest starting with one. Well, it depends on what you want to do. Maybe you want to grow a couple different varieties. But when you're putting them in the garden with some of them, like if you've started the broccoli plants, let's say, for example, you've taken them apart after you pulled them from your tray, you have them in pots, and maybe let's say you have your 10, 6 to 10 broccoli plants, depending on how many you're going to grow. You'll always want to do, I say as a basic rule, more than 6. The more the better for growing seeds. I know some people might not have a lot of space, but you can also look at the variety, look it up when you're going to save them. What is the basic minimum number of plants you need to maintain the genetic diversity? I know that we're going to get into corn here. There's some popcorn, and there are some of these varieties we'll be talking about that I do not suggest taking them from a tray of what you've grown. I would suggest with something like that, you would want to take those microgreen seeds, and well, they would just generally be seeds of that variety, and plant them directly in the garden. And with the corn, you're going to want more than 100 plants. So that's going to take up a lot of space. Well, maybe I think I'll talk about that as we go through each variety. So when you hear the plant or the microgreen that you want to grow for seed, I think I'll do some research on that and let everyone know as we talk about that. Just so you're sort of knowing as you hear this how many plants you might need, how much space. And so you've got your stuff in the garden. Now we've gone out, we've planted some of them, transplanted them from the pots, or you have direct seeded them, or succession plant, which is planting at different times for them to go to flower at different times. Like with the peas, if you put a row, I would suggest putting a long row of the seeds. But maybe you bought a pack of microgreens and you have 40 seeds, 35 seeds, depending on what it was. Who knows? Maybe you have more because it was 4 microgreens. You'll want to plant those all in the row and let them start growing and allow the plants to mature. So they're going to go through the summer. You're going to keep them watered, make sure they're fed everything they need, and they will grow to their full height and start to produce flowers. Depending on the plant variety, the seeds may be found in the flowers, pods, or seed heads. And some of them might go to seeds, like I had a broccoli rab, um, and I believe it was from a microgreen. I grew out some varieties to eat because I have so many different kinds of microgreen seeds. I planted some just to eat for food this year. I put them out there, and some will go to seed at different times. Some of them might be late spring, some of them summer, some of them might take into the fall before they dry down, and your biennials will have to be cared for to make them through the winter, and they'll go to seed the following spring. And so once they're dried down, you're going to want to collect the seeds and, of course, then dry and store them. Some important things to think about is that not all microgreen varieties can be transplanted or saved for seeds. Like some pea shoots are bred specifically for their microgreen stage and they won't produce viable seeds. I'm going to talk about all these different varieties that I have been looking up. These will be all varieties that you can save for seed. So I'm not going to talk about any types that are hybrid or won't. The peas that I'm going to talk about are all heirlooms and open pollinated, and you can save them. But that's something to think about. Maybe you have some seeds, microgreen seeds already, and just make sure that what you're going to be spending all, because this is a big investment of time and energy. And so you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. Like there's nothing more heartbreaking than putting a crop out there and caring for it and something happens and your seeds are they don't come through, or with peas if you had all that and they're not going to even give you viable seeds. Like if and this is with some of the GMOs. I should talk about that also. You don't want to plant any GMOs because they are suicide seeds, and they will not produce viable seeds. So generally you want to be staying away from everything GMO across the board. This is my perspective. I want nothing GMO in my life, and I would never even think about growing any type of GMO in my garden. So I always try to focus when I'm growing varieties that they are open pollinated and they are heirloom or heritage. That those are the best. Those are the best seeds to eat because that's real food. That it's food that's bioavailable for your body, and you can save the seeds. So it helps you towards self-sufficiency and food security. And then just something to say is that saving your own seeds from your own harvest is a rewarding experience. But just know that it may take some trial and error to develop a consistent process. I know every year I've been gardening, I still have major failures. I it's with it's just part of being a gardener. I don't know one gardener that never, there's always, let's just say there's always some crisis. Every year you may have a little crisis, something, there'll be something. There can be gong shows in gardening, and just know going into this that that's part of it. So, but doing some research and trying your best, starting out with the proper seeds and giving them what they need to get germinated and growing will set you up for more success. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up here for today. And next week, I'm going to start talking about the varieties. I hope everyone's enjoying this, and I hope everyone is having a wonderful holiday season. I know here right now it doesn't feel like too Christmassy because it's been raining. We're actually having warm weather, and I'm a little thankful for that with all the puppies. Because it's a little bit easier to keep it warm in here when it is warmer outside. But I wish everyone a happy holidays, and thank you for listening. And I look forward to talking with you next week.
Kitchen windowsill, a tiny green sprout. Plant those little microgreens, watch them pop out. Harvest those babies, keep them fresh and keen. Healthy food at my fingertips, you know what I mean. Scatter those seeds, now take it to the ground. Out in the garden where life's all around. Watch them guys grow, and then let them bloom. From micro to macro, soon our veggies consume. From seed to sprout, from sprout to plate. Food security never tastes too late. those greens and toss them in a dish. Feels like magic, it's my veggie wish. Get the seeds back from the harvest done. Cycle starts over and the savings begun. You never see a promise to greet. From soil to soul, it's a wondrous feat. Rooted in dirt, reaching for the skies. Made by Earth's bounty, it's no surprise. Neighbors see my garden, they join the trend. Growing microgreens, it's the latest spend. Sharing seeds, sharing joys, what we all need. Community spirit, plant the love seed. Neighbors see my garden, they join the trend. Growing microgreens, it's the latest